Okay, good evening, everybody. I hope there are people joining us, and I hope you'll bear with me a bit about the approach and the technology that we're using this evening, because it is new to us. These are strange times, and we're all having to learn different ways of communicating. And this method through Microsoft Teams does enable me to speak to a very large audience across residents of Homes for Haringey, but one of the quirks of it is we can't actually see how many people have logged in. So I would say it's lovely to see you all, but I can't see you, and I do miss that sort of more direct contact that you know, people like me who work in housing. That's why we do it. It's because we want to have that contact with residents. I was going to say a few things about what's going on in Homes for Haringey, particularly since lockdown, and then open up to you to ask questions. If you want to ask questions, there is a bar. If you roll your mouse or your finger across, if you've got a touch screen, then an action bar will come up, and on that you'll see one of the icons is two sort of speech bubbles, and one of them has a question mark in it. If you click on that, that should enable you to ask questions. And Kimberly Rowley, my colleague who is the head of communications for Homes for Haringey, will make sure that those questions are posted back through to me for me to try and answer during the course of this hour that we've set aside for the discussion. And I'm also joined by a couple of other colleagues from Homes for Haringey. We've got fortunate from the external communications. Most of you will be familiar with HomeZone, and that's very much Fortunate's baby. And he's going to make sure that we're recording the whole session and that we're capturing all the questions, so that if there are any that are unanswered, we'll be able to make sure that we do answer those and get back to you with responses. Do please bear with us on this, though, because this is all very new. It's very new to me. I have to admit that when lockdown happened, I hadn't used video calls at work, except for very, very rare occasions, and now they're a daily occurrence. And the licenses that we needed in order to do this sort of broadcast talk to a large number of people, we've only really been able to obtain and run this on council equipment in the last couple of weeks, and so we've only had this is our first opportunity to use it. So I'm sorry if you're guinea pigs, and I hope it's worthwhile. I wanted to say something first of all about COVID and how that affected work in Homes for Haringey and how we responded to that. Obviously, when lockdown happened in March, there was a very sudden scaling back of a lot of activity. So we couldn't have people going into people's homes to the same extent as we did before. We couldn't have people working on building sites the same way. There were closure of playgrounds on estates, all of that sort of thing. And we withdrew quite a lot of the routine work on estates and in people's homes. We then adapted the way that we do those services, and we were gradually coming back to normal. And then, of course, there was a bit of a relaxation of the rules. Most of our office-based staff are working from home. There are a few who come into the office, a different few each day, and there are a few who have to come in because of the nature of their work. But on the main, our office-based staff are working from home. About half of our staff are not office-based. They're either people like operatives who come out and carry out the repairs, the responsive repairs that you need. And then there's a good portion of them who work in concierge services and in estate services. and then we've got people working in some of our temporary accommodation that we manage ourselves. And we have, maybe not everybody knows this, but Homes for Haringey has a very substantial stock of supported housing, over 1,300 units. So we're one of the very biggest supported housing providers as a local authority. We're part, obviously, of Haringey Council in London. And those staff have been working as normal and have to work from the supported housing locations. The biggest impact in terms of demand and change in the way that we work has been in homelessness. First of all, there's been a reduction in some areas of homelessness because one of the things that the government did was it put a ban on evictions. And so people being made homeless through eviction is now very much rarer. It's only in very exceptional circumstances people can be evicted. For a while, the courts weren't even sitting, but even now, they won't necessarily evict, because while the rules have been relaxed to allow evictions, we have to give something like a 6-month notice period to carry those out, or landlords have to give a 6-month notice period to carry those out. So there's been a reduction in homelessness there. But on the other hand, there's been quite an increase in homelessness, particularly of single people, single vulnerable people, and also much more work done to make sure that everybody who is homeless and sleeping rough was given the opportunity to come in and be found accommodation. So that meant that the number of people we have in temporary accommodation went up very significantly and very rapidly. It also meant that the vulnerability of those people was much higher than we were used to before. And so we've had to learn new and better ways of working with the voluntary agencies, or the people from the voluntary sector who work with rough sleepers every day, and with our colleagues in adult social care who have much more direct experience of working with people with mental health problems, drug and alcohol misuse, and so on. That's not to say that this is what characterises all homeless people, but the portion of homeless people with those needs did increase. This has had a huge impact on staff, as you can imagine. Big organisation with over 800 staff. A lot of them were shielding. Many of them lost people, lost relatives. Many of them have got children at home who couldn't go to school or couldn't go to nursery. A lot of our staff are overcrowded, and just as many of our residents, and trying to work from home very difficult. And I think that it's fair to say that some of the work we do, obviously we find it very rewarding, and that's why we do it. But a lot of it can be very stressful, dealing with people in severe needs, trying to meet the needs of people that we just don't have the housing or the other capacity to help them as much as we'd like to sometimes. This is very stressful work for our staff, and I think that the additional stress of COVID has been very difficult for a lot of us. However, on the positive side, I think a lot of our staff have really benefited from the opportunity to do something slightly different. And in the first few months, we had a lot of staff who, in places of the business like finance officers, like IT people, who don't normally have much contact with the public, really leapt at the opportunity to help with the distribution of food to vulnerable people, not just in Homes for Haringey homes, but across the borough, helping the council with that. The big operation run from White Hart Lane football stadium, but with vans going out all over the borough to bring food and essential supplies, sanitary supplies and so on, to people who were shielded and couldn't go out at all. And they really enjoyed that. And I think that's great to see that connection. And see people enjoying that work, and I think it's one of the things that I'd like to bring into Homes for Haringey as we get back to normal, whenever that may be, that more opportunities for people in this kind of jobs that don't give them that contact with residents to be able to do that more. The other thing was that we had an ambition to visit all our residents this year, which I think was a sensible ambition, to get to know people better, for them to get to know us better, to find out more about their needs and find out more about how we can support them. And that obviously hasn't been possible with the restrictions and the social distancing that's required. So we've been doing a lot more calls, mainly targeted at vulnerable residents, and that has been very popular, and it's been very helpful for us. And it has demonstrated that the level of vulnerability of our residents is higher than we would have expected for a landlord of this size operating in London. And that's something that Homes for Haringey and Haringey Council really do need to reflect on. The impact of COVID on our residents has been very serious. Sadly, we lost quite a few of our residents, some in supported housing, some in general needs. The impact on people's employment, on the need to look after children who couldn't go to school, how that's exacerbated often by overcrowding. All of that has been very difficult for people. And while the ban on evictions and the ban on court action has been very positive in terms of reducing homelessness and preventing that happening to many families, not just in Haringey but all over the country, it has hampered our ability to take forceful enforcement action against people committing antisocial behaviour, making life miserable for their neighbours. And that's been frustrating for us, but it has also been very difficult for people on the receiving end of that. And we do acknowledge that, and we are doing our best to, within the sort of legal limitations and the restrictions of COVID, to improve on that. And part of that is, some of you may know that we have an interactive CCTV project which enables us to get very rapid referrals either to antisocial behaviour specialists or the police in more extreme circumstances, and deal with things like fly tipping, not just the nuisance of that people make when they come onto the estates and smoke drugs and cause a lot of noise, or other sorts of damage that you get on some of the estates. And we're extending that into Northumberland Park. And I was talking to the manager of that service this morning, that in just a few days that's been extended, there's been over 50 referrals to specialist antisocial behaviour officers to deal with antisocial behaviour on Northumberland Park in that area, and something like 12 fly tips actually caught on camera that we're now able to follow through. So I think that, on the whole, it hasn't been a good year for us being able to take enforcement action, but we are trying to improve that with better technology and better, faster response. I'd always like to mention domestic abuse, including coercion, not just violence. The impact of this is most frequently felt among women and girls, but it isn't just restricted to women and girls or straight relationships. Domestic abuse and coercion is a huge concern for us in Haringey and nationally. It's not particularly higher in Haringey than elsewhere, but it does lead to a lot of housing problems like homelessness, like the feeling that there isn't somewhere else you can move to with your children if you have them, to get away from a domestic or abusive relationship, and being trapped is exacerbating this. And it does lead not just to a lot of suffering for the direct victim, but often for their children and other relatives as well. Whole families are blighted by this. And we know that this got worse during lockdown. Not just the national data, but our own specialist domestic abuse service saw that increase as well. And just prior to lockdown, we in Homes for Haringey joined a national initiative called the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance. And one of the requirements of joining this is that you seek accreditation, that they will come and have a look at how you deal with domestic abuse and see whether it meets their very demanding standards for an organisation that merits accreditation. And the principal thing about this is that we have a very good specialist service in Hearthstone, probably as good as any, and I don't mean that. I'm not saying that boastfully, because it was running long before I came to Homes for Haringey, but it is really excellent service, and it has been acknowledged as such, not just locally, but across the country. But to get this Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation, we have to demonstrate that everyone in Homes for Haringey regards tackling domestic abuse as their business. And there are some really good examples of this already, where repairs operatives notice things, report them through, and they get followed up. Or the very sensitive work that repairs operatives do when they go around, for example, to a woman who's been experiencing domestic abuse and the violent partner has been excluded, but there's a risk of him coming back, and reinforcing the property, making it safe. This sort of thing. How estate services operatives or concierges respond when they see something that looks like coercive behaviour. There are some really good examples of this, but we need it not to be just good examples, but to be embedded across the organisation. And I think that the increase in domestic abuse during lockdown is a bit of a wake-up call, that we need to really focus on that hard. And that's something that is a priority for us as an organisation right now. I think it's fair to say that before lockdown, before COVID, we had already identified that a much stronger focus on residents and outcomes for residents, rather than what is the job here, what job do we do, what process do we follow, what procedures, and so on. And we want to spend much more time talking to residents, finding out more about them. The more that we know about you, the more insight we have, and this isn't just the way that we talk to you in the events that we have where we're with you, but also the data that we keep and how up to date that is, how much insight we have into people's needs, and so on. And that was something that we wanted to focus on, partly because of some very positive work that we've been doing, and also, frankly, because of some things that happened, whether it resulted in an independent report that showed weaknesses in what we do, or whether it resulted in a complaint to the Housing Ombudsman or the local government ombudsman that showed weakness in how we deal with people. All of these things come together to make us want to have much more of a focus. We want to be very much a people organisation. We're here for the people who live in our properties or who want to come and live in council homes. And some of this, a good example of the sort of work that goes on in the background is we've got a new commercial manager working in the repairs service, and not only is he sorting out some of the ancillary contracts that we need to have, but looking at the demand for repairs. Who are the people who are reporting repairs over and over? Which blocks, which estates, which types of property are we getting more of the repairs orders from? And this is data which hasn't always been available to us. The better landlords better served with their IT have had this sort of information available to them, and they've been able to work on it. And we're just catching up on some of that IT investment in Homes for Haringey and getting some really good information on this. And I think this will help us to do preventative repairs better. They will help us to find out where there are actually other needs, where there are investment needs, and the council always wants to hear from us about where the investment needs are, because it's seriously committing to investing heavily in improving our housing stock. Another example is the survey that we had carried out in June of our residents to survey the impact of the lockdown on them, and also what they thought about Homes for Haringey's response. And it was broadly positive. I mean, I have to say that we don't always get high scores by comparison with other landlords when we survey residents about satisfaction, and that's something we want to improve. This survey was carried out by an independent organisation called BMG in June, and they found that about 80% of our residents are worried about COVID, and about half of them were very or extremely worried. Just over a quarter had their employment status changed. That's a huge proportion, 1 in 4 of our residents. And when you bear in mind that we have a lot of residents who are retired and their employment status is not going to change, or don't work because of a long-term disability, that's a huge portion of those who are in employment having their status changed in just 3 months. Half of our residents said that COVID had a negative impact on their personal finances. Now, we know that some people have actually benefited from COVID, because they don't have to pay for journeys to work because they haven't got so many things to spend money on. But those are a very small proportion of the residents that we have in Homes for Haringey, about 10%. But about half have had a negative impact, and that was in June, and I suspect that figure would be higher if we did the survey now. 18% said that they were dissatisfied with Homes for Haringey's response, which is lower than many landlords were getting, but still way too high from my point of view. And they wanted better communication. And I think, in fairness to the communications team, they can only communicate what the rest of us give them. And I think that since that survey, we have been better at getting information out. But be interesting to hear your comments and questions about that when I've finished. And the other thing that was really interesting, and this is the one thing, if we only take one thing away from the whole survey that I want us to focus on, and that is those residents who had been contacted, the vulnerable residents I talked about who'd been contacted, or others where we'd had cause to contact them proactively. They were the ones who were most positive about Homes for Haringey's response, and it confirms my view that we need to have much more proactive we shouldn't just be like a big sort of complaints department. If you've got a complaint about your house, and get in touch with Homes for Haringey. That's not what we want to be. We want to be making positive contact with people, finding out more about their needs, and giving people the opportunity to work with us to improve services and the quality of life in our accommodation. Then a few other things just to run through. I mean, it's a sort of never-ending list what we're doing in Homes for Haringey, but one big area of concern for us is improving the investment programme. The council really has put its money where its mouth is when it comes to investing in improving council homes that we've got. Not only do they have a very ambitious house building target, which I think is attracting a lot of publicity, but they have an equally ambitious plan to, or intention to improve homes. And some of these homes, because of in previous council administrations, there was some uncertainty about the future of them, and therefore there was less investment, or there was some uncertainty about how much the council could afford to spend on these homes. But we are now catching up. And we are doing a significant, there's £21 million worth of work we're expecting to get approval from the council, and in Knoll Park estate alone. There's a very significant amount of money being spent on improving Broadwater Farm. Some of the estates where it's been uncertain whether they should we invest in them, should we redevelop the estate and so on. We're now just getting on with it at Turner Avenue, Imperial Wharf and places like that. And I think this is great. I think it's a really good news story that we've got council behind us that really wants to invest in council homes. There is, and we have to acknowledge this, there is another side to this story, which is that while it is very welcome, the cost of some of these works to leaseholders, particularly where the works are extensive or where there's been a long period of underinvestment in the property, the cost to leaseholders can be very high. And I spent this morning visiting leaseholders who are affected by some of the planned works that we've got going in the borough, to try to find out more about what we can do to help with those costs. And that is a big priority for us at the moment, because we don't want this to be a leaseholder versus tenant issue or a divisive issue. And we don't want people, especially now, with all the economic impacts of COVID, to be to turn a good news story, which is that we're investing heavily in improving council homes, into a bad news story, because so many people are having to pay or having to make plans to pay bills for improvement works. And the council has asked us to look at an improved package of support for leaseholders in that situation. The works that are going on at the moment, or being planned to go on at the moment, those bills will not be coming out for some time. But we've been given the challenge of coming up with a package of support for leaseholders, which is at least as good as the best in London, and go further than that over the coming period by having more discussions with leaseholders about their specific individual needs, so that we can come up with even further improvements in the very near future. And I'm really pleased about that, because it has been a worry for a lot of us in Humsa Haringey and in the council, that some of the work that's needed and has been outstanding for some time is going to have this impact on particularly resident leaseholders who are, like most of the rest of the country, suffering from the economic impacts of the pandemic. The other thing that is concerning us a lot, as besides the investment programme, and it's linked, is resident safety. And this is something that we have to focus on anyway. Some of my colleagues and friends are involved in the Grenfell inquiry this week, giving in evidence. You may have seen this on the national news. I've been around in housing circles in London for a while, and I know these are very good people, but I also know that the scale of the loss of life at Grenfell and the shock that could happen in London to the extent that it did, it's still, it was shocking on the day that it happened. And it still shocks me now, and it makes me doubt everything that I ever thought about resident safety, and it's made me want to dig further into the information and not believe anything anyone tells me about resident safety unless I've gone over it and over it and over it. And you find that's a very common attitude among people in the housing world at the moment at senior levels. But in addition to that, there is also new legislation coming out, so often as a response to Grenfell. that we have to implement. And we're slightly different from most council landlords these days in that we have this arm's length arrangement with Homes for Harringay, but we are essentially part of the council, as I said. But we're under the arm's length arrangement. We have a board of management which is made up a third of resident representatives who are elected by you. And that's really helpful and really empowering, I think, for residents. A third is made up of council nominees, roughly, and these are councillors, so 2 from the majority party, Labour, and 1 from the Liberal Democrats. And the other third is made up of independent experts. And 2 of those are experts in property and safety matters. One works for a large housing association which previously had some very serious concerns about its safety record and compliance, and he was the person brought in to sort that out. And another who's an acknowledged expert on resident safety and housing asset management. And these 2 are leading a subgroup of the Board of Management of Homes for Harringay, which focuses on what we call in our jargon property compliance, but what we mean is how well building safety matches the standards that we say we want to maintain, and which the law says we need to maintain, and which the best practice in the sector says we should maintain. And that's been a really interesting piece of work, well supported by the council and well supported by some very high quality interim managers that I've been able to get to come in and work with us in property services. And at the moment we're going out to advert for a whole new property services team, and we're looking for that level of expertise that we've been enjoying from some of the interim managers, particularly around safety, but also to manage that improved investment programme that I talked about. Homelessness is always an issue for us. We have a very substantial number of people who live in temporary accommodation, and one of the benefits from us, if you're looking for something positive in all that's been going on this year, one of the benefits is that we have got so much stronger relationships with the specialists around vulnerability, the kind of vulnerability that can in many cases lead to homelessness, particularly among single people. I'm working better with the adult social care and the outreach workers, the people who are out there on the streets every day trying to find people who are rough sleeping and trying to work with them. Very difficult, very admirable work. It's really impressive to see when I go out with them and see how they interact with people, and go around places like Highgate Woods in the middle of the night, almost after midnight, and finding people sleeping rough in very isolated places and making sure they've got access to support. And some of the work we've been doing on homelessness is also focusing on the quality of temporary accommodation, which in my opinion needs to improve very considerably. We are making some progress on that. Obviously, the big focus since March has been around making sure that our temporary accommodation enables social distancing, and so the temporary accommodation that we have, where people are sharing kitchens and bathrooms and so on, we've depopulated that a lot and moved people to self-contained accommodation. But some of our own temporary accommodation stock does need investment, and it does need better management. It needs better cleaning, it needs better security, and that's something we're working on. And it's quite difficult to make as much progress as you'd like in the current circumstances, but it's something that matters a lot to me, and it's something that I know that we've got board members who are very passionate about it and speak to me separately about this, and I think it's admirable that they're prepared to put in that effort on behalf of residents. And finally, I just want to say something about our own sort of internal structure and culture. And I hope you don't feel you're indulging me to go on with a bit of navel gazing. But I think that, you know, I've mentioned a few things along the way. I'm very positive about Homes for Haringey and the people who work for it. And one thing I always say when I'm talking to staff here is that when we're at our best, we are really as good as any landlord or any housing provider. Aspects of our homelessness prevention work, the domestic abuse specialist service, some of the very difficult technical issues, the speed with which we introduced a district heating system at Broadwater Farm. You know, these are things that any landlord would be proud of. But there are things that I've also dropped hints along the way that I'm not happy with. Some of the way that it's so difficult for residents to contact us sometimes, or get through to the right person, or get through to somebody who will deal with them as a person rather than just an aspect of your housing problem. I think that some of the the standards in temporary accommodation need to improve. I think that we are going to need to speed up on the capital investment. I think that it's not fair that our residents are living in often in housing that is not as in good condition as other boroughs round about, even though Haringey Council is making enough money available to improve it. We have to deliver those improvements, and we have to deliver them better and faster. And so there is a lot that we need to do to improve our structure. I've been talking to our staff about a new vision, which is a very simple one for a housing organisation, and the top priority there is that we're notable for the way that we care for our residents. So that's the thing that people see and judge us by. Providing good quality homes and neighbourhoods, having engaged staff, people, not necessarily people who are compliant, who do what they're told, but people who want to do the best for the residents and contribute to an organisation being the best, and being a well-run organisation. But above all, I just want people to apply a mum test or a friends and family test, that when they're going out, when they're going to visit people, when they're going out on estates and that sort of thing, always consider, would this be good enough for my mum? Would this be good enough for my daughter? And if it's not, then do something about it. And so we've got quite a considerable programme of management training, culture change training for staff, IT improvements, so that it's easier for people to get through to us online and deal with things that way, if that's the way they want it. More neighbourhood management, particularly at Broadwater Farm, but we want to move it out to other estates where there's more local grip on all the services going on in that estate or that area. And above all, really, in order to make all this work, is just to be more efficient. You know, make sure that we're only doing things that really do have an impact on residents, that we don't do unnecessary stuff, we don't send things around in circles, take the same decision more than once. You know, this sort of thing that infuriates you. If it's any consolation, it infuriates me as well, and I am determined to do something about it to make sure that we do that. And not only that, but it will release. I'm sure it will release money that we can spend on improving services, and you should see the benefit of that. So we have a big program of change going on internally now, and part of that is making sure that you are involved in how our services are designed, and that information about you is informing everything that we do. So that's my update. It's gone on rather longer than I expected when I drafted it earlier, but it's over to you for some questions, and I've got some already. Let me just have a glass of water. So thanks Mehel, for services affected through lockdown. So all our services have resumed, and they should be providing an as normal service. They're not necessarily the same as they were before. So one of the things that we haven't done has gone back to the old way of homeless people getting in touch with us, where previously they had to go through some sort of triage arrangement at Wood Green Library or Tottenham Library, and then they would be referred on to us if they felt that our specialist help was needed. And this, I must admit, I was never particularly happy with it, but it was a difficult thing to change. But we were starting to change it anyway before COVID happened. So it involved us, having a sort of closed door policy that unless you had a piece of paper or an advanced phone call from the library contact centre at the library, you didn't get in, and I don't like that. And we had changed that, and that was a good thing. And we had opened up a specialist with the council, jointly with the council, a specialist single homeless service at Mulberry Junction in Tottenham. But since lockdown, both ourselves and the CAB have found that it's actually easier for people in need to get through to us, either online or by phone. And for us then to see them by appointment just cuts out a load of, and surprisingly, I wouldn't have expected this a few years ago. And someone my age, it's quite difficult to keep up with this stuff sometimes, but people do find it much easier through this, through these methods to get in touch with us. So that has changed. I thought I only had 2 questions, so I was spending a bit more time on them, and I thought I am learning as I go along. Otherwise, our services are back to normal. Then I've got a question from an anonymous question about moving to outsourcing repairs. So we don't outsource repairs. What we have got is we have got subcontractors who do either specialist work or pickup work where, because of the volume happening at any particular time, they have to pick up that additional load. And I think I'm probably not best to remember some detailed figures sometimes, but I do know that the level that we outsource of repairs is actually low by comparison, because we did compare it with other landlords with in-house services, and I think our in-house service on the whole is very good, and so do you, because we get routinely get over 92% satisfaction with repairs that are carried out by our own staff. But we also know that we have got a small but significant number of people like yourself who are affected by long-term leaks, and this is something where the work I was talking about, there's better work on identifying where these long-term problems are and doing better preventative maintenance to avoid those leaks is something which is a priority for us, and I think that's what the issue is. It's being able not just to go and fix the leak, but do the really significant work to prevent it happening again, that we've got to get stronger at. And I don't think that's an outsourcing issue. I think that's more about us organising so that we're better at preventative work. Okay, so before lockdown, being informed of the date for the decent homes work would be contacted. Okay, I'm sorry you didn't get a response to your email. I'm always happy for people to email me. I put my email address in Home Zone every week, not every week, it's not a weekly, but every edition. And it is just sean.mclaughlin@homeforharingey.org. And I will chase up if you don't get an answer. But we are keeping as best as we can, because there were some huge delays. There were 3 months of no work happening at all because of the COVID restrictions. But as best we can, we're getting those dates for Decent Homes and other major works revised on our website. But if you have got questions like that and you're not getting an answer, just email me. I won't necessarily answer because I won't necessarily know the answer, but I'll make sure someone who does get back to you. We didn't. Thank you for the question about our staff. Fortunately, we didn't lose any staff, but a lot of our staff lost very close relatives, and some of our residents as well, who were well known to staff. So that was very sad. But thank you for that. Question about car parking. That's a really good question. So last year. The question is, are Wings going to continue monitoring our car parks? Last year, the council agreed to review the arrangements for parking on our estates and enforcing car parking restrictions on our estates, and we've carried out that review, and we're going back to the council's cabinet in December with a plan to go to a different form of enforcement from next year, one that is still legal because the government has changed. Well, what we're doing now is legal, but we don't have the power to enforce it as much as we'd like. And we will be going to a different legal basis for the parking enforcement that enables us to enforce it more rigorously. And we will be introducing some charges. So with the exception of older people and people with disabilities and some other exceptions, will be with the exception also of people with low emission vehicles, we'll be introducing, if this goes through, annual charges of about £30 a year per vehicle, and that will enable us to enforce this better. And we will also be sharing a system with the council, so it won't be Wings enforcing this if this goes through. It will be the same council team that enforces parking on roads. Lorna from Ferry Lane Action Group, can recognised residents associations have the names and contact details for Homes for Haringey staff? Yes, I don't see why you shouldn't. I didn't realise you didn't. So I'm looking at little icons of Kimberly and Fortunate saying, can we make a note of that one to follow through, because you should have those names. Are we getting the 1,000 new homes? Yes, we are. So the new homes that the council is building, we are very closely involved with that, because obviously they want to know that their designs and their plans are going to be ones that will work, and our experience of managing them, and they will be managed by Homes for Haringey. How will we respond to the recent Guardian news coverage of leaseholders receiving bills for pod replacement? Works delayed for decades, which is true. Reasonable to now charge these costs when they could have been much less if the issues had been addressed when the pods were originally scheduled to be replaced. The current situation is causing friction between leaseholder and social tenants. Yes, well, as I said earlier, this is exactly what we want to avoid. I did visit some of the leaseholders this morning, and I've had a lot of discussions with the leader of the council and the executive councillor responsible for housing, Councillor Ibrahim, and we are arranging for some of the Noel Park leaseholders to meet with me and the chair of Homes for Haringey as well. And the critical thing for us, and the thing that we've been discussing in a lot of detail, is how far we can extend the support that we give leaseholders to pay these bills, and how much we can do to, so for example, extend the repayment period, reduce the amount of work that it's necessary to do, involve them in looking at that. All of these things, and as I said earlier, the brief I've got is to make sure that our package of support is at least as good as the best that's out there, and then move on from that by talking more to leaseholders about what will work for them. I think that the scale of the works at Knoll Park, I know this sounds really simplistic, but the reason why those bills are so high is because the council is spending so much money on improving the estate, and I think that's that's a measure of the council's ambition, and to make up for any sort of past deficiencies in investment programs. But we've got to try and do this in a way. The bills will not be going out to leaseholders for some time. So on Knoll Park, the bills will not be going out to leaseholders at least until the middle of 2022. That gives us time to not just to work up the options, but to implement those options to give the leaseholders that support. What is being done about noise nuisance neighbours who continue to do building works daily, affecting all residents, especially who are working from home? Yeah, so I think it's really important that if you are experiencing noise nuisance, that you report it, and that we then talk you through how best to deal with that. And I think that's something that we will help you with. And we can help you with keeping a record of what's going on, so that we can take action, or our colleagues in the council if it's more serious, in the antisocial behaviour team, and it also helps us to indicate where we need to go around with some noise monitoring equipment and so on. So we have got the ability to help you, and if it's a fairly new problem, then we can sometimes just resolve these things through mediation or having a word with people. But if it can't be resolved that way, we will take more action. Electric vehicle charging points on any estates and no plans either. That's a question from Lorna at Ferry Lane Action Group. So this is something I think this is something we do need to improve on, and to be honest, I think we focused on parking enforcement, and also on how to raise some revenue for improving parking and supporting the council with its the council recently agreed to a program, statement around the climate emergency, and one of the ways of backing that up was going to be to make electric vehicle charging points better. But the focus at the moment has been on that consultation around parking improvement. We are recruiting to some specialist posts, because I think we need to catch up. And I talked about some of the improvements we need to make, but if I'm going to hold my hand up, I'd say improving on the way that we support the council with its ambition to tackle the climate emergency is another area. So we're recruiting to some specialist roles there around energy, and I want to see them not just working on the traditional things around insulation and so on, but making it easier for people are living in our properties to lead that greener lifestyle, and I do think that the improvements in parking and parking signage and so on need to be accompanied by a firmer plan around that. So I think that's a good question. I think it's more of a comment than a question in a way, but it's a comment that I would agree with. Another question about Knoll Park. I think that there are things that we did get wrong with the communication on Knoll Park, and I think that the way that some of the information was bundled up there was a genuine misunderstanding among some of the residents that they had to pay the amounts that were indicated in the consultation notice, that they had to pay this very quickly. And we did move in very quickly with an explanation that that's not the case, and that was reinforced in a letter that was delivered to all leaseholders yesterday. There was another misunderstanding that I'm not sure quite how this got out there, because I don't think any of us said this, but there was a misunderstanding that they would be allowed to speak at our board meeting, and that request wasn't really made. There was a statement that we were asked to circulate. So if there was any fault on our part for that one, then I do apologise. But I think that the really crucial thing at Knoll Park is to recognise that there's a lot of essential work that needs to be done in order to make those properties safe for their residents. And secondly, there are some very high bills for leaseholders, and we have to mitigate those. And we've got to find a way of doing both those things. And I genuinely think that, you know, the contact I've had with leaseholders, although obviously very angry, I think that we can work through this constructively. But it is very, very worrying, and it's not, you know, it's a very bad time to receive. No time's a good time to receive a very high bill, but we are, you know, we are approaching this quite methodically and getting some better information about what leaseholders' individual circumstances are, is the key to us being able to come up with solutions that work for each individual leaseholder. There's a question here about drug dealers. I'm not sure what to say this anonymous questioner lives on, but yeah. So I think it's really important that drug dealing is reported to us, and if it's on an estate where we have got CCTV coverage, then that you know, that will certainly help with that. But we do have other means of going out and monitoring this. It's something that the leader of the council particularly has spoken to me about many times, and it's something that where we know about it. We do work well with the police and our colleagues in the council's enforcement team. It isn't always easy to get the evidence you need to prevent it. A lot of it does involve exploiting children as well, so we work with children's services around this too. So then there's a question from a council tenant at Knoll Park. No, the issue with the leaseholders will not delay the works happening to your flat. We're very clear about that. These works have to happen, and they have to happen as quickly as possible because of the conditions and because of the experience you described. Question there: what's the difference between Homes for Haringey and the council? Homes for Haringey is a company that is wholly owned by the council, which means that it does have the benefit of the board, as I described earlier, but also it has access to, occasionally has access to separate funding and so on. It can employ slightly different contracting arrangements, can often work a bit faster to get those in place, and can have different staffing arrangements if need be. It does have its own separate dedicated, as we see tonight, our own separate dedicated communications team and so on. But essentially, we are part of the council. We manage council homes, and in a few related functions, we manage homelessness assessments and similar functions on behalf of the council. And the policies that we work to have to be agreed by the council, and our funding all comes from the council. So it's a model that was introduced in housing management about 15, 16 years ago across the country. It became the most common model for council housing management. Still, the minority of councils still have the model. Usually they look at changing it when the standards of the property are brought up to a certain level. And I'm sure at some point the council will review these arrangements, and I think that's only right. They were last reviewed in 2016, and I'm sure that there will be another review at some point, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. I think that everybody is so focused on building the homes that are needed, doing the investment that's needed, and coping with all the fallout from COVID. Do we have secret shoppers? We certainly do. We have a resident scrutiny panel. We had a really good presentation to ourselves as a management team and the board last night on their work over the last year. It's doubled in size, and they do a lot of mystery shopping. Building safety. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, those sorts of things that you're describing are unacceptable on building safety. We do have fire risk assessors who go out and assess the works that are done, the works that are needed, whether it's just somebody fixing something or removing a blockage in a corridor, or whether it's more investment or some more detailed analysis of what's going on in the building. Those fire risk assessments are now being backed up by a fire safety delivery team. This is a new team that we put in place. I didn't mention this in my introduction, but a new team that we put in place over the summer to speed up the implementation of actions arising from those fire risk assessments. The fire risk assessments were suspended for a while during COVID because we couldn't do them in a socially distanced way. But they have resumed, and we are catching up, and by the end of November we'll be back to where we should be. Redeveloping Millicent Fawcett Court is a new rumour to me, but it's I don't know the answer to whether there's any plans to build new homes in that vicinity, but I've certainly not heard about redeveloping there. If I've missed something, then we'll pick that up when we mop up the questions that weren't asked. And there's a comment from a leaseholder about overcharging, which, I think that all I can say about that is, I don't know the individual circumstances relating to your experience, but I can say that we are really keen to get a better relationship with leaseholders. I said earlier that our satisfaction levels with Homes for Hangate Services are not as high as they should be. They're not as high as the better landlords, and we have a particular issue with satisfaction levels among leaseholders, which we have to acknowledge and we have to do something about. And that's not going to be helped by the fact that we're now doing a lot more capital investment work than ever before, and that will bring with it large bills for leaseholders. I understand that, and I understand that's a huge challenge for us to reconcile those things. But if your experience is correct, and I'm not going to challenge it here because I don't know the individual circumstances, but if your experience is correct, that's exactly the sort of thing we need to be getting right every time, at a time when we're going to be billing leaseholders to this extent. So the questions have stopped because we've overrun. I do apologise for overrunning. I hope this has worked. I'm always happy for people to comment directly to me on things, and I'd be really pleased to get your feedback on this. I'm doing a similar thing in a couple of days' time for staff, and any hints or tips you can give me about how to improve it would be very helpful. And also whether a different format, maybe more time for questions would work. We haven't worked out a way of being able to allow you to switch your camera on and ask questions to camera like you would in a normal meeting with me. But if we do manage to work out how to do that, then we certainly will. But any other suggestions that you have for how we can communicate better with you during lockdown will be very welcome indeed. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking part. And sorry about some of the rustiness about not appreciating how many questions I had, because I just didn't know how the system worked until we try it. Thank you, and good night. Thank you.